Hi, my name's Chris Lindley, and I'm excited to go through a presentation today about one of the topics I'm most comfortable with and excited to share with, and that's around strength training and how specifically strength training or resistance training can help extend your health span. So let's jump into it. So first, who am I? It's always good to know a little bit about the presenter. I'm a dad, a husband, a son, but I'm also a grandson. My grandmother, who is 97 years old, lives with us today in Eagle, and she's remarkable. At 97, is still 100% independent, even though she lives with us. She takes care of herself and me many times day to day, and is really the model of health span and what we're all trying to achieve. And that is to not only have a long, full life, but to be able to do those things that we enjoy late into life and to really have a high quality life. A couple of pictures here just describe obviously my interest, mountain biking, getting out with friends, doing fun adventures outdoors. And on the bottom there is a picture of my two kids. Reese is my oldest. He's out in San Diego. He's a parkour instructor and going to school full time. And my daughter Marae is in Honolulu. She's a gymnastics instructor and going to school full time. So I'm very excited that both the kids have chosen to work and still be involved in fitness and wellness fields. Because growing up, that's something we always try to push our kids to do, and seeing them follow those passions is really great. So let's start off. What is strength training? Many terms are out there: lifting weights, resistance training, growing muscles. So as I refer to strength training in this presentation, it's really covering all the areas of you know, specific systematic work to improve your strength, your power, and your muscle size is what we're talking about here today. So first question, how many Americans engage in strength training on a weekly or monthly basis? And when you look at this at the epidemiological data, it's probably only 5 to 15% of us are actively doing strength training. So self-reporting in this space, 30% report doing strength training. But when you look at the data, it's probably over-reported. 20% of Americans belong to a gym of some sort. And we know from industry standards that only 50% of people that actually pay a membership at a gym actually go. So that gets us down to about 10% of Americans are actively using a gym of some sort or studio. But when you look at what people do when they're in the gyms or studios, a lot of them are doing other activities that's not specifically strength training. Probably only about half of them are actively involved in strength training. So now we're down to about 5%. You might say, well, I've got my home gym and many other of my friends have their home gym. But when we look at that, like, let's be honest, most folks that do have a home gym and actually engage in it and use it on a day-to-day basis, we kind of call them unicorns. They're special, they're self-motivated, they're driven, but it's not the majority of people. And we actually look at digital platforms like apps that you download that have a workout program. Well, many folks will sign up for these apps, they'll pay the money, they'll have the intention. Less than 20% of those programs are actually ever followed. So looking at all of this data, I'm pretty confident to say in America, probably 5 to 15% of us are actively engaged in a specific design strength training program to really enhance our health span. And we'll talk a lot of details of what that looks like here in this presentation. So what is muscle? So a nice image up here. This is an anatomical image here of the human body. And underneath of our fat and our skin, we all look like this. We all have a beautiful muscle structure. We have a six-pack underneath of our stomach. We have well-defined pecs and shoulders and biceps and triceps. And it really creates an armor around our skeleton as well as our organs and our vital organs. So it really is our defense armor, and that's how I like to think of it, as our shield against anything that might come our way. We know, and I'll talk a little bit about this, that your muscles actually improve your metabolism. So the more muscle mass you have, the higher your baseline metabolism is. And so one thing we test in Healthspan is we come in and we test your resting metabolic rate. RMR, resting metabolic rate. And those individuals that have higher skeletal muscle mass have higher resting metabolic rate. So that means even at rest, an individual that has more muscle on them will burn more calories at rest than someone that doesn't. We know in order to move and go through different postures, you need to have strength. So it improves your mobility. And as I'll talk about in this presentation, and one of the really emerging areas in exercise science is how it really impacts our mental health. So it impacts our mind. There's a direct relationship there between not only your skeletal muscle, but using that muscle day to day and your mindset and your overall mental health. So the way I think about it is when I'm lifting weights or working with individuals to lift weights, we're really building resilience. So we're building a protection against those things that might come our way, but we're also building that resilience mentally as we go forward, as we work through it. So one of the biggest topics we talk about in Healthspan is called sarcopenia. And what sarcopenia is it's the natural progression of losing muscle mass as we age. And it's a pretty devastating situation. It's a pretty scary statistic because this affects all of us in some shape or fashion. We can slow it down, we can maybe pause it, but with age, we all start to lose muscle mass. It's part of aging, and to date, we haven't found a way to completely prevent it. So these are averages, but on average, after the age of 30, we'll lose around 3 to 8% per decade. So every 10 years, from 30 on, the average individual is losing 3 to 8% of their skeletal muscle mass. This is without active training. If you're actively training, as we'll go through on this presentation, you can preserve that muscle and you can actually even increase it as you go forward. But without active training, you're just going to lose this as time goes on. So after 50, that rate actually doubles without active training. So you could go from losing 3 to 8% to 6 to 16% per decade if you're not actively engaged in strength training. So sarcopenia is the natural loss of muscle, and as I mentioned before, as you lose muscle, you really lose independence. One of the pictures I have up here is the human thigh, and on the left you can see healthy muscle mass. Even though the overall circumference of the thigh is the same, on the one you can see the thick red image in there. That's the muscle mass making up the majority of the circumference. And on the one on next to it, you can actually see it's actually made up of a lot of additional subcutaneous fat and fat within the muscle. And that's that idea of, you've heard the term skinny fat. So folks might look like they have the right body composition, but underneath that skin and inside, they might be lacking the muscle they need. And so that's one of the reasons in the Healthspan program, we have everybody do the InBody, which is a body composition analysis. And it's really to look at skeletal muscle mass and see how much muscle folks have, because the majority of us are going to be in the category of wanting to increase that muscle mass and maintain that muscle mass as we go through this program. So why does muscle matter? This is, I'm an epidemiologist by training, so I love data. And this is a pretty powerful study, and I have the reference here if folks want to look it up. But it's looking at how muscle mass actually affects mortality, or your likelihood to die. And as your strength increases, your risk of chronic disease decreases. So, or to say it the other way, as your strength reduces, your risk of chronic disease increases. And if you look at this, it also really highlights that it's not your BMI. And for so long in healthcare, and we still do it today, you go in and see your doctor, or you look at national studies, it's like, oh, your BMI is 27 or 28 or 29. But that's not a really great measure of what your composition is, because what we care about is how much skeletal muscle you have and what your body fat percentage is, not how heavy you're on the scale. Weighing yourself on the scale doesn't give you the data you want. So when you look at this, it actually shows that those individuals that might be well, they certainly are heavier because they have a higher BMI, but have higher skeletal muscle mass, outperform those that have lower BMI. And then as you drop all the way down to the frailty group and underweight group, obviously they have the highest mortality. We see that with our grandparents and aging adults as they age, and if they're not properly taking care of themselves through nutrition and exercise, they get more and more frail. They kind of get more hunched over, and you look like almost like you can touch them and break them. That's the frailty, lightweight individuals at the bottom. But at the top, even if you are a little, like I used to say, my mom used to always call me husky, so you might have more body fat on you, as long as you have a lot of lean body mass as well, you're actually going to be better off than anybody else. So again, stop looking at the scale as terms of weight. Rather, look at your lifts and see how you're doing strength-wise. That's a much better measure of how you're going to do later in life. Muscle is also an amazing metabolic engine, and many of you have heard of diabetes, and specifically type 2 diabetes, which is really a lifestyle-based disease. Type 1 is genetic, you're born with it, but type 2 you develop over time because your body can't keep up with the glucose that's in your blood through your lifestyle, through lack of exercise and what you consume. Muscle, we know, actually stores 70 to 80% of all the glucose. So that's the sugar that's in your body, the glucose, the energy source in your body. Your muscle actually stores that. So the bigger the reservoir to store, the more you can store. And so more muscle directly equates to better insulin sensitivity. So that's a term that is thrown out many times on podcasts. You might be following different social media accounts and folks talk about insulin sensitivity. What's that mean? That's really your body's ability to manage glucose. And so how well that insulin is able to take the glucose out of the bloodstream and store it, whether it's in your liver, your pancreas, your muscles, wherever it's storing. But again, the muscle is storing 78% of it. So the more insulin sensitive you are, the better you are of taking that high glucose out of your bloodstream and storing it where it needs to belong. So it's something you want to have. And muscle leads to better insulin sensitivity. So we know this prevents diabetes and increases your metabolism. There's also a hormone connection, and hormones are all the rage right now. We hear about them all the time. If you are a member of a fitness facility or a walk club, you're probably out talking about hormone replacement therapy. Folks are talking about different strategies. The best strategy for anybody would be to start strength training. Strength training increases the key hormones that are really going to bring about big metabolic changes in your health as well as your mindset. So growth hormone, testosterone, those are increased, both men and women, when we strength train. There's also these amazing chemicals, molecules called cytokines. And when our muscles contract, every time they contract, this could be walking and running, this could be lifting and moving, we release little cytokines into our blood system. And these little wonderful molecules actually heal the brain and the heart. They're like little, think of them as little messenger molecules that go out and do great work healing your body. So even though, as you'll see later in this presentation, when we work out, we're actually breaking down muscle fibers that then later grow when we recover, as we're breaking down those muscle fibers and exercising, we're really releasing these cytokines that are such beneficial molecules as we go out there. But also balances our cortisol levels, which directly impacts our stress response and makes us feel better. One thing I've always personally, sometimes it's really hard to get out to the gym or to join a group for an exercise session or to go out and ride your bike. But never has there been a time that when you're walking out of the gym or after that bike ride or that walk, you really regret doing it. You always feel better. And that's the real thing we all know is if you can just get in there and do it, it's going to have a positive impact on you psychologically. The real hard part is that first step to get moving. So just a little bit about what our muscles look like, and the details of this aren't necessarily important, but the message I want to get across is as we strength train, we are actively causing little micro tears in our muscle fibers. So think of it as a braided rope, and we're causing these little micro tears in that braided rope as we lift. So the harder you lift, the more weight you lift, the more little micro tears you have. But what happens is over the next 48, 72 hours, as you're recovering and with proper nutrition, those micro tears actually repair themselves and come back thicker and stronger. And so that's the process of strength training. Is it's little tiny bit of tearing of the system and breaking down the system so it grows back stronger and better than it was. But you got to have both the stressor and the rest in order to have the adaptation, which is increasing your strength and muscle size and quality. Recovery, again, it happens when you are not working out. So growth happens between the workouts. So reminder, and one of the reasons why recovery is one of our shields, it is fundamentally important to having a long, healthy life. We all need probably between 7 and 9 hours of sleep to really get the best recovery. And with that, a reminder that our nutritionists are always pushing, and that is to really get enough quality protein in throughout the day. One of the numbers I like to use that's easy is trying to get 1 gram of protein for every pound. So I weigh 205 pounds, so I'm trying to get 205 grams of protein through the day and trying to do 30 to 40 grams every meal to pull that off. So that means I've got to have more than 3 meals to get that protein intake throughout the day. So depending on how much you weigh, it's a really easy calculation to see probably where you should be on protein intake. One of the reasons why this is also so important is as we age, we actually get less effective at converting amino acids and what we eat into muscle. So we actually need more protein as we age. And so all of us need to be focused on protein intake as we go through this Healthspan journey. Functional training. So this is a term that has become very popular. It actually, I think, has gained its popularity with CrossFit and the growth of CrossFit and lifting and kind of these box workouts over the last few years. And it's nothing new, and it's great that it's growing in popularity. But these are those larger compound lifts that you do, like a squat, a deadlift, or a press, where you're using multiple muscle groups together in coordination across your entire body. So it's not an isolated movement of, if you will, just doing a bicep curl. Rather, it's picking a weight off the ground to your hips or throwing a large weight on your back, squatting down to a 90 degree and coming up. So large muscle groups moving in coordination together, pulling everything together. And what these are really doing is they're mimicking movements of life. And so in life, we push, we pull, we squat, we hinge, we lean over and pick things up, we carry stuff. And so if we're really training for Healthspan, being able to be independent and enjoy life later in life, we need to be training those movements that are going to allow us to do those things. So you think as we get older, we're pushing our luggage up into the storage compartment on an airplane, right? That lifting motion. We're pulling things to us, or lifting a child, a grandchild up to us. We're squatting, we're bending down to pick things up, we're walking upstairs, we're going downstairs. The hinge motion is so unbelievably important because one of the most common injuries as we age is lower back injuries. And a lot of times that's people just reaching down to pick up the paper or to tie the shoes, and they pull or they throw out their back. And that's because they haven't been training those muscles. And then obviously probably what we'll do the most as we age is carrying things, where it's carrying your groceries or different items. So as you exercise, if you incorporate these larger functional movements into your program, you're going to be training for later in life. And you really don't need to do a lot more than this. If you're doing these moves that are identified here, you're actually going to cover all your major muscle groups as you go forward. We also know in order to maintain your balance and your mobility, you got to have lean body mass, you got to have the muscle. So mobility really preserves independence. And some of you watching this have felt the consequences of aging, where you lose some of that mobility. As you age, your step's not as big as your step used to be. You also notice that your balance not what it used to be. And the only way to slow down that natural progression that happens with aging is through focused work. So doing flexibility, strength training, and really focusing on those movements and those postures to maintain that mobility and flexibility as you age. It takes work. And that's the message of everything in this presentation here today is, while strength training and exercise is the most effective tool we have for Healthspan, it is really the hardest as well, because it requires us to actively engage in these activities a few hours each week to be successful. It's not a pill, it's not a shot. They have nothing that can mimic exercise today in the pharmaceutical space. You have to go put in the time, and you have to go through the moves to really get the benefit. Adaptive stressors. I got a picture of one of our colleagues here, Dan Pennington, working out. This was just 3 weeks ago at the gym, and wanted to take this picture. You can see he is all in. He's gritting his teeth. He's working hard, and he looks great. Dan has been focused on his health and wellness as his number one priority over the last year. He's lost 60 pounds of weight on the scale, and has probably gained 10 to 15 pounds of lean body mass as doing it, and has really fallen in love with the art of strength training and the benefits that he has. But it's an adaptive stress. It's hard. And so when you hear the term hormesis is doing hard things and having stressors on your body that lead to improvements in your health. And so whether you're lifting weights, which is definitely a stressor and it's a challenge if you're doing it right, or sitting in a sauna or a cold plunge, or that's a picture of my daughter and I going out and doing something scary that's hard, like surfing a wave that's a little bit above your skill set. Those things lead to adaptations that make you better. So doing hard things leads to improvement, and that's those small stressors that build resilience. And that's what strength training is. It's going in and pushing yourself, pushing your muscles, causing those micro tears, as I mentioned, that then over the next few days lead to an adaptation that actually improves your strength and your ability in the gym on whatever exercise you're doing. I mentioned earlier brain health. There's actually an amazing book out there. I have it in the reference here, but for those that really want to see the connection between strength training and brain health, Christopher Palmer wrote a wonderful book called Brain Energy. And the research that he and others have show that strength reduces depression and anxiety. And in many cases, it's actually more effective than traditional treatments we have today in that space. So one of the first methods we should always lean to as individuals, if we're feeling depressed and anxious, is to get some exercise. It's something we should all be doing as frequently as possible, but certainly those that are having a bad day, bad week, a bad month, this should be one of the go-to things, in addition to reaching out and seeking care with a behavioral health professional. It also increases brain-derived neurotropic factor. This really leads to neurogenesis, and so the growth and the improvement of the connections of all the synapses in our brain, which leads to improved memory, focus, and self-efficiency. One of the reasons why I personally, and I recommend for anybody that can do it, to work out first thing in the morning, is it sets you up for a really productive morning at work or whatever you're doing. You are alive, your mind is clear, you're able to focus and get a lot more done after those workout events. Epigenetics, this is a topic that we've talked about a little bit in the Healthspan space, but I want to explain it again before kind of jumping into this. And so we all have a genetic blueprint inside our body. Think of it as a keyboard on a piano. We're all set with a keyboard, and the majority of our keyboards are identical. There's very little variability from person to person in our keyboard. So think of us as all having a keyboard, but how that keyboard is played is called your epigenetics. And so which genes are turned off or turned on, and when they're turned on and turned off, is really driven by your lifestyle, the things you're doing, the way you think, the way you eat, the way you move, the exposures you have to. That's called epigenetics. And so it's the lifestyle factors that actually control the gene expression that you have. And so one of the terms I always use is your genetics might load the gun, right? We might all have a loaded gun, but the pulling of the trigger is really the lifestyle. So even though you might look at your mom and dad, your relatives, and say, man, I've got bad genetics, this is just who I am, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to follow the same destiny as they did. By modifications to your lifestyle, many times you can change that trajectory. So we know that exercise actually turns on specific longevity genes, and two of the really big researched longevity genes out there that are being researched, and this is being done at Harvard by Dr. David Sinclair, is the SIRT1 gene as well as the FOXO3. And we know that exercise-specific strength training brings additional expression of those genes, which are really around preservation and healing as we age. We also know that it builds mitochondria. Mitochondria are these, like, think of them as little battery cells inside of think of them as little batteries inside of our cells. They produce ATP, which is our energy source. And as we lift and exercise, we're actually building new mitochondria, so that allows us to produce more energy and have more energy as we go. So where do you start, and what is really needed? And I think this is one of the biggest misperceptions, and I'm going to use an analogy here. So we've all had friends that have talked about a brilliant business idea. Came up with this great idea, going to start a business. And the next time you talk to them, you're like, well, I really don't know what my logo is going to be. I'm still working on my logo. Or I don't know if I want to be an LLC or a partnership, etc. Right? They're talking about and they're stuck on the first step, which is just start doing the activity of the business, and those other things you can figure out with time. It's the same thing in exercise and lifting weights. We all know we need to do it. I don't think there's anybody listening to this presentation here today that would say strength training is not something they should have in their weekly plan. It's the activity of actually going out to do it. And so this is what you really need at a base level. Just 2 to 3 sessions per week. And these sessions can be 30 minutes to an hour. They don't have to be longer than that. So really, we're saying here is 2 hours a week of focused strength training work where you're doing progressive overload training. That means you're coming in and trying each week to make little improvements on the last week. Maybe you do a little more weight, maybe you do a few more reps of an exercise, maybe you add a new exercise, but always working to be a little bit better than you were the week before. And so you have to track your workouts to see how you're doing, to make sure you're making improvements. You got to eat right to fuel after those workouts to recover, and you got to get the rest. And so if you can carve out just 2 hours per week, and you think about how many hours there are in a week, this is really where we need folks to start. And all of us should have this in our routine from today until the day we die. This should become part of our daily lives of building this in. We've talked about the 7 shields here at Healthspan a lot, and the 7 shields are social engagement, being connected to nature, recovery, movement, mindset, adaptive stress, and feeling. But when you look at strength training or lifting weights, it really touches 6 of the shields right off the bat. And I'm going to kind of go through each one to remind. And you can also make it touch the 7th, which is connection to nature. Really easy by just doing it outdoors with friends, which is very easy in many uh, outdoor boot camps or going for a great hike with a backpack with weights, a great mountain bike ride. Many of those things can be done outdoors, so it really touches on all of them. But social engagement at the top is something that we all crave as humans. As humans, we are herd animals. We've always been tribal, needing to live with others for protection, for interaction. Since the beginning of humankind, humans are not designed to be completely independent and on their own. They're really herd animals. And so having that connection is important. And you can do this in a great way by having a workout partner or working out with friends or going to a fitness class or going to a fitness event and just being around others. Not only is it enjoyable, but it helps with accountability. So finding a way to be accountable and having others ensure that your success is great. Fueling, you can work out as hard as you want, but if you're not fueling after those workout sessions and those exercise sessions, you're not going to get the results that you would otherwise if you were properly fueling. So again, reminder, eat the protein, try to get 1 gram of protein for each pound you weigh. Or another way to think of it is, can you get 20 to 30 grams of protein every meal going forward? Adaptive stressors, the idea of hormesis, this is doing hard stuff that will lead to resilience. This is fundamentally what strength training is stressing and challenge your body in different ways to bring about an adaptation that makes an improvement. Mindset, because one, you have to show up. So you need the mindset to get there, to actually put in the time, to put in the investment. But also, as you're going through the moves, we'll use a back squat as an example. That's where you have weight on your back or you're holding weight in front like a goblet squat and you're bending down to 90 degrees and coming up. You should be visualizing what's going on in your body, right? Your quads are engaged, your hamstrings, your glute, your core is tight, your shoulders are back, your chest is lifted, you're breathing in on the inhale. So you should really have that mindset of thinking through and visualizing the movement as you go, really creating that mind-body connection. Movement, by definition, that's what we're doing. And then recovery, as I mentioned, you can put all the work in the world in, but if you're not giving your body adequate time to recover and heal and improve, you're not going to see those results that you want. I talked about loneliness briefly, but I want to touch on it more. I truly believe we're all stronger together. And so finding a community, a friend group, a friend to do this with is really, really important. It will accelerate your progress. They'll not only motivate you, they'll hold you accountable. And while you're doing this, think about talking about this with your community or your lifting partner and your friends. How do we lift for longevity, health, lifting for life and not for looks? For too long, lifting weights has been associated with vanity and building muscle for bodybuilding. But I think for those of you that haven't been in the fitness space in the last 5 years, it's really changed. And a lot of the protocols that you see and what trainers are working on now is really around lifting for function and life and not for looks, and really focused on how are we going to prepare ourselves for the next few the next few decades of our life to make sure we can continue to do all the things that we know and love. I've added some references here, and I just want to talk to a few of them. For folks that haven't yet read Outlive by Dr. Peter Attia, it's a fantastic read. It's heavy on the science, but he's really thought of as kind of the leading spokesperson in the longevity and health span space today. Is an amazing podcast, this book, Outlive, is fantastic. It has a lot of great material. And what he has said and will continue and continues to say is the single best thing you can do for your longevity, which is your health span, is to strength train. That there's no better medicine out there. There's no better thing you can do than getting your 2 to 3 hours a week of strength training in. So it matches up with what we're talking about here. Dr. Gabrielle Lyons is a fantastic read in her book, Forever Strong. She too has a podcast and a lot of great resources. And her big message is that muscle is the organ of longevity. That if you think about where do you want to invest most time, money, and effort, her message is you want to invest that into your muscle and building your muscle mass as you go. Last one I'll talk about here is Christopher Palmer. I mentioned this earlier. The book is called Brain Energy. It's a fantastic read, and it goes through hundreds and hundreds of scientific papers and studies that have really shown the connection between movement and strength training with overall mental health, and why it's so important for us that are interested, like myself, and I think many of you, into our behavioral health. Of one of the pathways to that is through exercise, specifically strength training. So that's what I have for you here today. We're going to continue to put more resources up on our website, which is vailhealthspan.com, and look forward to producing and putting out more content in the weeks and months to come.